We're live. Hi, everybody. So this is Steve Sabludowski, publisher of BayouBuzz.com. And this morning, we're going to be talking Louisiana politics primarily with pollster and political analyst Bernie Pinsonat. Good morning, Bernie. How are you doing today?
Hey, good morning, Steve. Typical day in Louisiana, chilly weather, which we're not accustomed to. So, first time in my life I've ever wished for summer to return, but that's what we have in Louisiana. But yeah, what's happening in Louisiana is it's about to heat up. Not so much the temperature, but the intensity and friction at the state capitol, which is a yearly occurrence over the budget and taxes.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so before we're going there, let's just quickly talk about last night. I'm assuming that you saw the president's speech.
Yeah, I was in and out on it. I saw most of the comments on it.
Okay. So first of all, I mean, what do you think, and how do you think it would resonate here in Louisiana?
Well, I would think it did. You know, I think I don't know what their sample was and who they polled, but I saw CBS said 75% thought the president gave a good speech. In Louisiana, it would be that, and probably around that number. You know, it was a speech about his accomplishments, and I'm sure his voters, especially his voters, are 100% in agreement with him. Trump's kind of an odd, I guess you'd say, not odd, but he has something going for him that you haven't seen. And he's got that about a 42% base, and it stays with him. Doesn't matter what he does. Not many people have that kind of base. No matter what he does, his base really doesn't care. They just like what he says and what he does. And it's hard to get them off of him. But that speech, I'm not going to say it resonated with hardcore Democrats, but it certainly was something that his base and probably the average person who's not, politico, I'm sure they liked what he said.
Sure. So what lessons do you think that maybe those people who are beginning to try to raise money to run for an office here in Louisiana, or those people who are rubbing up to the legislative session, are there any lessons that perhaps you can take from the speech or from what Donald Trump is doing that would help those people prepare?
Well, you have the Donald Trump that set an all-time record in Louisiana for votes, people turning out and voting for him. He literally stalled Hillary Clinton here. It wasn't any surprise, but you have to be surprised and amazed at how big the turnout was for Donald Trump. Still, Louisiana is still a red state. There's been nothing that I've seen that's going to change that dramatically. I don't see the legislature moving back towards Democrats next year. I think and I work for some Democrats. They're harder to find and work for these days because there's so few of them in the Capitol, especially white Democrats. But the majority of the money spent next year will be overwhelmingly for Republicans. You have two congressmen all running this year. Does anyone think any of the Republican congressmen in trouble? No. You've got the anti-Trump stuff that's probably pushed some of the white Democrats more towards the center, but that's not a big problem for Republicans because Republicans will run ads saying who you want representing you, Chuck and Nancy, or do you want the Republican brand? So Louisiana is pretty much it's gone Republican in the last 20 years, and will it stay that hard right? I don't have a crystal ball, but at the present time, it's pretty solid hard right. There has been a slight shift, but it's related to attitudes. But I'm sure that no Republican congressman is that worried about it. I think their solution is to remind their base and majority of Republicans and independents. Why the Republicans dominate Louisiana? Because you don't want Chuck and Nancy. It used to be Harry Reid, now it's Chuck Schumer.
Right. So, what elections are coming up?
Well, you've got the Congress, the U.S. Senate across the United States. This will be a huge year. If you're in the polling business, getting a poll done in Louisiana will be difficult because all of the calling houses, all the call centers are already booked because there's so many polls being run across the United States. Because you have, Louisiana is odd. This year, for example, 2018, we only have the congressional. We have a few municipal and judges and that type of stuff, but in every other state besides Louisiana, they all have spirited. Well, I'd say most of them have spirited congressional elections. The state government elections, local elections. In Louisiana, we push all our parish and statewide elections. We separate them from our congressional elections. So we're going to be fairly quiet this year. But if you do need a poll, you're going to run into the call centers being just totally swamped by all the other states and all the other campaigns that are running polls. So this is a big year nationally for polling, for consultants, for the media, for political junkies. The entire United States will be fixed and focused on will the Senate and will the House remain Republican? What kind of inroads will the Democrats? What is the Trump effect? So a lot of political interest this year with a lot of activity. In Louisiana, not so much. Nobody, I don't think anyone thinks that if a Republican congressman would be in trouble in Louisiana, it may be from someone who's more conservative or thinks they can beat the current Republican who's holding that office. Their biggest challenge would be from another Republican.
Have you heard anything in terms of any of the Congress people, current Congress people, having any challenges?
I think you could have some. You've got a new congressman in the Acadiana area, and we'll the basic thinking is if you're going to unseat one of them, your best chance is at the end of his freshman year where he's not that well known or whatever else. But I don't, at this point in time, I think I've heard talk that someone or maybe someone else or two people may be running, but I haven't seen any survey that shows the congressman's having any. I haven't seen any poll that says he's in political trouble at that point.
Right. So I know that you did a poll in December, and why don't you refresh our memories about pretty much what your findings were?
Yeah, I think it was one of our more interesting polls. It was a great picture, snapshot of Louisiana. The survey showed that you had Kennedy and Cassidy at about 50%, 47. You had the governor went back up after the session, as usually does. He got up to 64. But the backdrop was, it was interesting. You had, do you want to replace health care by the Republicans? And it was 47-48, which was very interesting. The entire poll we said was all about it wasn't about the basic number, it was about the numbers behind the numbers, which showed Louisiana in a deep political divide on issues. If you're a Republican, your support was there. But if you look at issues, if you're a Democrat and you're a Republican, you pretty much went along party lines on whether you were for or against a particular issue, which was the case with health care, which was the case with renewing the penny, which was the case with anything related to what direction is Louisiana moving in. You think direction of the United States is yes. The Republicans were very, very positive on that, and Democrats were very negative on the direction of the United States. In Louisiana, Republicans were not so impressed with the direction of Louisiana. Of course, Democrats, especially African American Democrats, were overwhelmingly positive on the direction of Louisiana. So it was a poll that shed light on this point in time of a year of Donald Trump with all the national negative media towards him and towards Republicans, and it showed how Louisiana was somewhat very similar to the rest of the country, where we were basically split down party lines, and your position on political issues were solely determined on whether you were Democrat or Republican.
So John Bel Edwards has, at this point in time, and I know we have a session, we have a fiscal session coming up, which is going to be pretty bloody.
Right.
But if you consider that he's got a 15-point advantage over, say, John Kennedy at this point, and a 16 or 17-point advantage over Bill Cassidy. I mean, does that tell us anything in terms of just projecting forward, in terms of beatability?
Well, if you look at John Kennedy and say, gee, he's only 50%. But, John, that's because of a lot of white Democrats, or not a lot, but one of the white Democrats at this point in time are giving not so good or whatever else. They've been turned off by the national media. The problem with that is that it doesn't take John Kennedy. No one right now thinks John Kennedy can't win his reelection. And no one, if you put those two people in a poll, thinks that he's going to beat him by 15 or 20 points. If you had the election, if he is his opponent, I don't think anyone thinks that John Bel Edwards is a lock cinch. In fact, he would be considered the underdog, although Kennedy beat Kennedy, certainly he beat Kennedy. But it would, there are so many circumstances that are, will Trump be down here? Will the Republicans next year, when this is the major only race, will they come in here with $25 or $30 million like they did in just that little silly congressional race in Georgia? I mean, they can send $50 million into Louisiana if they really want to, and that's not a big deal for them. They spent $50+ million in that Georgia congressional seat just to show Democrats in the South that we can beat you anytime you want. So, I'm not going to look. He's popular. It's sort of in a vacuum. There's nobody attacking him. There's no money out there. But can he win next year? Certainly he can win. But he's still running. He's still running for re-election in a red state. And if anyone thinks that, for example, if you mention the name Steve Scalise wants to come back to Louisiana, I don't know of anybody who thinks that he won't be the next governor. I mean, he's just that strong and that popular. So, can John Bell beat Steve Scalise? Probably unlikely, but I wouldn't say that he's totally dead. But this is still Louisiana, and you rev up the anti Chuck and Nancy, and you start talking about the guns and all the other stuff. Nobody's doing that to the governor right now, which is fortunate for him. I'm glad it's not, because we don't really need the legislature to be fighting over the governor's race next year. We don't want that. We don't. We tend not to like that. They're going to fight enough over whether we want a penny sales tax and what do we do with the budget, Steve. So all of that is next year. It's I could say that the governor is a cinch. I can say Kennedy is a cinch, but I really don't know. I know that the chances are, if he has a John Kennedy or a strong Republican, they don't need money. Money is going to flow into Louisiana like crazy. So the question is, can they beat John Bel Edwards? I'm not going to say that he can't win, because he can win. The Republicans have the ability to reelect him because they elected him to start with, and they're very capable of making mistakes and putting him back putting him back in the governor's mansion. So there's just a lot that can happen between now and then. But to say that his popularity is 64% and he's essential for re-election, that's just not the case. He's in good shape. It depends on so many factors. And one of the things that I wonder about is next year, with everything over and this being the focus in the country, that when, with a lot of money coming here and a lot of Democrats are they're very suspicious of any Democrat winning a big statewide race in the South. This is one, they didn't back Mary Landrieu. They didn't think she would win. They never were. And they came in here last year with Foster Campbell. How did that work out for him? He got stolen. So next year is next year, and his numbers are good. I'm sure he's very pleased with them. But once that session's over and we get into October, November, then you'll start seeing people decide whether they want to run or not run. And as I've said before, we have a congressman. I've heard of people who are thinking about running for governor, but the bottom line is, until John Kennedy decides what he wants to do, if he doesn't run, then it does open it up. But until he says yay or nay, everybody else who's thinking about running, you're wasting your time.
So, have you heard anything about whether Steve Scalise is thinking about running for governor? I mean, I know we talked about this before.
One of the big, what if the Republicans lose the House? I mean, that certainly will change the dynamics a lot. Well, and that's 50-50 right now. If the Republicans lose the House, I guess he could be minority leader. Does he want to, or the minority whip or whatever? But that's certainly a big difference in being where he is now and being in the minority party. Would you like to come back to Louisiana and run for governor? And by the way, you get a free shot. So that's another question that'll be answered after the November national elections. We'll see that will be one of the factors that play into does Scalise come back to Louisiana.
Do you have any feel at all in terms of the national issue as to whether or not the Republicans could lose the House or Senate nationally? I mean, would you compare, say, what's going on right now to, say, 2010, 12, or 2006, or something of that nature?
Well, normally it's difficult for the party in power to maintain the first congressional elections after the election of the president. Party in power normally loses control of the House or the Senate. We don't know as they do have a decent advantage in the Senate. Unfortunately for the Democrats, they have so many people running versus there are few Republicans running versus the number of Democrats, and you have a number of Democrats running in Trump-controlled areas or Trump-support areas. So, I think we really won't know. The number is about 8 or 9% favorable towards Democrats on a ballot, which is a decent indicator. Not always, but it's decent. But there's something different. And if you listen to really smart people in Washington who talk about this, they're not adamantly say this is what will happen, because we have something that's different. It's the Trump effect, and nobody knows where he'll be by midsummer. He has a base that sticks with him. If you get those people out, I mean, that's a huge base to have 42% stick with you no matter what. And you're not watching. You watch him do things that you just like blows your mind. And poll comes out 2 or 3 days later, and those people haven't budged off of him. So we don't know what that means in this upcoming election. The Democrats certainly have a slight advantage. The Republicans will have a lot of money, though. The Democratic Party itself, I think, is in disarray. The official, the DNC operation. I think most of the money now is going to outlier organizations. I think they were irritated the way Hillary let people stay home. She didn't have a game, a ground game, and I think you're seeing really won't be able to go by the DNC operation because it's really been crippled. It's so controversial and it irritated so many people that a lot of these George Soros and other billionaire, millionaire types of funding organizations that aren't connected to the DNC, they're really doing their own. They're doing their own campaign organizations, and they're going to spread out across the country and literally try to replace the Democratic Party, which they think now has baggage. It's not being run properly. It was decimated by Hillary related to public relations. So we don't know how that'll work out. But, I mean, there are a lot of ifs this year, but I think by May and June we'll have a pretty good picture of the country and where each party is. The election, we won't know till election night. But it's going to be, like I said, Louisiana. The rest of the country is got lots of elections going on all over throughout the state, and being a pollster outside of Louisiana is great because you've got a lot of business. Being a pollster in Louisiana, this is literally an off year.
Right. So, if anybody has a question, go ahead and ask it on Facebook and Twitter. And I'm looking at Facebook right now. I'm trying to check to see if you have any questions or comments. Moving on to the upcoming legislative session. I mean, what's going on regarding the fiscal cliff? I mean, obviously, we're talking another $1 billion, and there's a lot of negotiating and dancing going on right now in terms of who should put up the I guess the budget numbers. Who's winning that war?
Well, this is what I find. This is what I found interesting in the survey, which is this is Louisiana. This is a true picture of Louisiana, and it tells you just about everything you need to know. That survey that you properly quoted about John Bel Edwards' numbers, you're 100% correct. But if you go down a few questions in this thing, and you ask about renewing a penny, which is very important to the state government, it's you only have 25% of Louisiana said renew the budget without budget cuts. That's a small number of people, and you're trying to renew a budget that causes a penny, that causes a cliff. Yet you have 38% say don't renew the penny and still cut. Now, that's a big number, Steve. I'm amazed that the media they run around quoting my survey on John Bel Edwards, which they're absolutely correct. But to attempt to say that John Bel Edwards is correct and all the legislation fall in line, and if my clients, Democrat or Republican, I would say, look, you don't know, but that penny could unelect you. By the way, the person that would beat him would run against him on that penny, and he or she would be more conservative than the legislative we have, and that's Louisiana. That's our red state. That is a very troubling number to me. Nobody has sold this tax, this penny sales tax. So we continue to. I find that the media is a little disingenuous when you talk about how popular it is, but they leave out the point that this sales tax is very unpopular. There's nothing in here that tells me that people are looking forward to paying a penny without budget cuts and budget reductions. So Um, we're trying to have a special session. And if you're reading this survey, which everybody says it's a wonderful survey because it's so dead on John Bell, which it is, that same survey tells you and me and anyone else who reads further than John Bell that the voters in Louisiana, you don't have a lot of people in Louisiana who want the penny renewed without any other action related to it. Could that be improved? Sure. But nobody's made the case at this point in time that we need this penny and we don't need budget cuts. That's not something the Republicans are going to buy into. You can have Republicans who are moderate who claim it, but the Republicans who are his opposition, support them back home on what they're doing is overwhelming. They don't go back home and hear anybody griping to them about you need to support John Bell and a penny. They'll say that is not what happens back home. So, and there's nothing you can do to beat them if they vote against you. I mean, it's popular back home. So, what's missing is there's not been enough done in Louisiana to convince people that why the penny is important. Threatening them with fiscal cliffs has never worked. And that's just people in Louisiana are so tired of that. They heard that they've heard that for 30 years, and no one has ever fallen off the cliff and died yet. That's the way most people talk to me about it. So there is a information gap. I'm not saying that anyone should or should not renew it. I'm saying if you look at the numbers, and it's scary how the lack of support for renewing the penny just in and of itself without any other action. Even the people who want it renewed say, okay, we'll do that, but let's have some budget cuts. Then you have the biggest number is, let's not renew the penny, and I still want you to cut the budget. And that's the Republicans in Louisiana that these, especially these House legislators who are much more closer to the people in smaller districts, they know what they're hearing back home. So that's why we have this impasse, because Republicans back home aren't telling them to go out and support John Bel Edwards and raise my taxes. It's just not happening.
Okay, so I guess the question is, what are, say, the two sides willing to give up? I mean, certainly, if you're talking about cuts, what are, say, the Republicans willing to cut?
Well, that's what John Bell's always asking them. That's
well,
what.
It's a fair question. I mean,
well, well, here's what's bad about that. Republicans can sit down and start cutting across the board. Yeah, I mean, going to agencies, and their base wouldn't care. I mean, most of their base doesn't really. They're affected by government, but not nearly as dramatic as people who need government assistance. But you dare the upper income, like one of the things that you have to be careful with from higher education. The most educated people in Louisiana do not want to pay more taxes for any university, but they should appreciate it the most. But if you ask them, do you want to pay additional more income tax or penny sales tax or anything else for LSU or any university, and they're not there. The poor people, lower middle class, are much more supportive of raising revenues for educational institutions. Now, when you get to local schools, K through 12, everybody's supportive of them because all of the kids are affected. Then, if you're talking about, like last year, the transportation tax, same thing. Everybody thought my poll was really solid. They liked it. It showed John Bel Edwards doing good, and yet everybody ignored the fact that the vast majority of Louisiana said, I'm not paying more money for a gasoline tax. And you know what? The Republicans wouldn't budge, because back home they would have been beat for re-election if they'd have voted for that. And if you're selling concrete, I can understand why you want them to vote for it. But they know that the only people who showed up at the Capitol to push for a transportation tax were lobbyists and special interests who who would benefit from the tax. And what was missing was the ability to convince the majority of voters in Louisiana that this was necessary. They watched $700 million leave the state troop. Leave transportation fund into the state troopers budget. Give me a break. I mean, you know, people, and the other problem, Steve, is, and you're seeing it locally, especially in areas like Baton Rouge, people don't believe that laying more concrete is going to make their life better. What they're facing is every time someone builds a new road, builds a highway, or even interstate, it only means that more people are going to access it because there's no limitations on lights. And so they build a new road to get traffic moving, which is what we're supposed to do. Yet within 6 months, it's another parking lot of traffic. In Baton Rouge, we have 5 or 6 major arteries that were built. We're going to 4-lane this, it was 2-lane, and it's going to make everybody's life better. Well, now there are traffic jams and parking lots from 5 to 6:30. So they're seeing that pouring concrete and more, creating more roads and highways really doesn't make their traffic experience any better. That's one of the problems. So a lot of these in Louisiana, you want to know why we're a red state? You watch it all the time. I do too. About 80+% of all taxes proposed in Louisiana across the state are struck down, and mutilated, or beat up, and they fail because the public doesn't buy from government all that elected officials claim we need, and when it fails, they really don't. There is no great consequences to them. And I'm not saying the money's not needed. I'm saying that the ability to get voters to have a preference or being supportive of taxes is sorely lacking in Louisiana. Nobody seems to be doing anything. I guess I'm saying we need a different approach. We need better explanation. We need convince voters that it's going to make their life better, not make some bureaucrat or somebody who's in that business make his pocketbook better because they don't believe that what they're selling them, or they reject it.
Is it fair to say that everybody wants cuts, but they want to cut the other person's pot? I mean, like for example, you take Tops. I hear a lot of people who say, "Hey, cut healthcare, cut roads, cut education, but don't cut the money that my kid gets, to help pay for his university."
I totally agree with that, and that's Russell Long's great saying from years ago, and it does apply. But the problem today is you have the upper middle class and upper class that if you tell them you're going to cut government, it's not that important to them. I mean, they all want government, but they don't see government.
Specify Tops. I mean, that's the big ticket item, I think, in terms of what John Bell Edwards is threatening, and what the Republicans are afraid to lose. So if you target and say Tops, I mean, in the poll that you did you mention anything about Tops?
No, I did Tops last year, and it was people thought that people think the governor did the right thing last year, was fully funded to the people that had it. There is room in surveys right now that if we don't have the money, let's honor our commitment if you want to reduce this, but the kids who are in the system right now, don't cut them. That's what polls show. But if you ask people in Louisiana, you want to pay more income tax to fund TOPS, they're going to say no. They're not going to say automatically yes. You ask them, if you ask them, do you think the government has enough money to fund TOPS, which is % of the budget, their position is, yeah, we think they have the money. They may not know it, but that's their inclination, Steve, and that's where the rubber meets the road, and there is that disconnect.
But that's such a vague question. I mean, everybody's going to say, well, the government, certainly has money, and we can cut here, cut there. But I like your question. I mean, I do like your question. Are you willing to cut TOPS as part of the cuts that we're going to make in budget rather than raise taxes?
Well, I didn't ask that, but that would be part of a series of budget questions. But, look, the majority of people in Louisiana don't believe, they believe John Kennedy. We have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. It propelled him in the United States Senate, and from an obscure, he used that in the Treasury.
But part of the spending is TOPS. I mean, it's hard not to disagree with him, but if you ask John Kennedy, are you in favor of cutting TOPS, what do you think he'd say? And let me just say this, I'm not in favor of cutting TOPS. I'm just saying, wait a second, let's be honest about this. Because...
Well, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm saying that the problem with it is you have people that don't believe the government needs to cut TOPS because they don't believe that government doesn't have enough money. Now, when you had $1.7 billion budget shortfall when John Bel Edwards took office, we had a decent majority of 53 or 54% of all voters were for the penny sales tax. But the same poll, when you ask them, do you want to pay more income tax, it was 78%, Steve. Mm-hmm. And you know who was part of that? White, black, brown, Spanish, it didn't matter. They were all opposed to raising their income taxes. You and I know that in a lot of cases, Louisiana would be better off if we collected more income tax. It's hard to argue with that. Like, nobody can sell it to the voters in Louisiana. And I guess Foster did it, which was a miracle with the Stelly. And then first chance they got because of the public uproar, General caved in on it, we got rid of it. We're going to get some more money because of the federal tax cut. The state will get some more money, which is paid for by upper incomes primarily, by the way.
By the way, that means, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, we're not getting this money from outside. Basically, that just means that the taxes we pay to Louisiana are going to increase.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yeah, so you can't deduct.
Right.
Yeah, so that means you're paying more to the state treasury.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good for Louisiana, but
the taxes are going up. The state taxes are going up.
Yeah, so,
and you balance that with the other benefits that you might get.
Well, I've done all of the polls you can do on taxes and even TOPS. I agree with you, but the problem with the public is you start out with government has enough revenue. If you ask people, do you want to pay more taxes for TOPS? Probably they're going to say no, the majority of them. Then you're going to have the people who think they have the money. Then you have the people that don't think TOPS is even should be funded. So it's a blend of TOPS, but you're also looking at the popularity of TOPS versus people have become used to that program and they want it funded. John Bel Edwards certainly thinks it's important because he's now put it as priority funding. I don't think he started out that way, but he can read a poll just like I can. It's a very popular program, and if you're using it to try to get people to vote for to not to cut the budget, it's a smart move on this point. So I'm agreeing with you. You can use TOPS to fund the budget and say that this is part of the cost of doing government. So if you want to cut the budget totally, you're going to lose TOPS. We can protect TOPS, but we can't make the deep cut you want us to make, and that's what John Bel Evans is trying to do. The Republicans are saying we don't, back home they don't want to pay more taxes. And I agree with you. Go back home and say this is what the cost of government is, but nobody's really made the case yet. In any survey I've done, in Louisiana, we need more money for roads. We need more money for pay more taxes for higher education. So all of those things languish, and we fight about them year after year. So you're correct, but I'm saying from my standpoint on polling, there continues to be a disconnect. We continue to have year after year budget crisis where we're going to fall off the cliff. But to be honest with you, I haven't seen a poll that says anything. I'm sure the people who solely depend on government, they're worried about it and they're scared, but beyond them, it's not that big a deal to the average person.
So the Republicans, specifically the Speaker, wrote a letter to the governor just recently. I don't know if you had a chance to read that letter. And basically what the letter said is that what we can do is we can reform the process. And I mean, that's pretty much, in my opinion, what he's saying. The budgetary process.
Well, I'm sure he has. I read it. Don't remember exactly, but the governor's not that interested in responding because you're still looking at the governor wants the process to be something that he can win the majority of what he wants politically, and the Republicans want a budget process that ends up reforming a process that that keeps their voters happy on limited government spending and less taxes. That's unfortunately, they both have different opinions on that, and you have a Democrat as governor, you have a majority of legislators are Republicans, so we're in the impasse, and that's an interesting approach, but they're still going to argue about who comes out the best. The process is going to be about which side is favored. I don't see anything that's going to change right based on that. And I don't think the governor's going to jump up and say, well, let's go do that. He's only going to do it if he thinks he can win.
Sure. What about the plans? I mean, we're talking about during the governor's race. I mean, there was discussion about trying to take the burden off of higher education and healthcare, but we're still facing, that the only place we can really cut are healthcare and education.
Well,
so things really haven't changed.
No, that's obviously one of the problems. I mean, we put so much, we put so many restrictions on where we can cut and what can be cut that the only people left to cut are they're very important to Louisiana, which is higher education. So they're the biggest target, and then the other group is healthcare. So if you want to look at a crazy process that makes no sense, why would you stick healthcare and higher education as the only area you can cut? And why are they not? Why is healthcare even stuck out there on its own? It's more important. Look, healthcare is more important than K through 12 or higher education. We want those to be available. We want it to be the best we can have. But without healthcare, without uh, hospitals without doctors and the availability. That's not logical. That's not our first priority. It is our first priority. Uh, our second priority is to educate our kids, but we want them to be healthy. We want them to have doctors. We want them to be able to get their shots. We want to have emergency rooms open. Of course, higher education sits out there, and its particular problem is in Louisiana, as I said. Um, they're not nearly in the same league as departments as healthcare and K through 12. Why healthcare sits out there, I've never been able to figure that out. But no, you're 100%. If you want to look at reforming spending, and that's one of the things they're discussing, certainly. But there are people who want those out there so they can say if you don't fix the spending, these are the ones that so they run. You see, uh, you see you see all the hospitals execs and all the head of the university say, God, if we have a budget deficit, they're gonna shut our hospital down. They're gonna close our university. So they're at the mercy of all of this political rhetoric, and they run out there year after year, having to beg for being funded properly, and it's not exactly a great image for Louisiana to have. Um, but yet it continues to go on year after year after year. I don't know if everything should be cut, but everything should be on the table within reason, and that's one of the budget reforms that I don't know what the governor's position is on, but I'm sure the Republicans would like to be able to look at more areas in the budget. But will that really solve the problem? Not really. When you don't have enough revenue, you don't have enough revenue. Priorities notwithstanding, we still cut state government when we still cut these departments. We still reduce their budgets. We still reduce travel. We reduce it enough. Well, that's one of the Republicans' arguments. But the the making college presidents and hospital executives stand in front of a camera begging for money and please do not cut us is something that I don't think anyone in Louisiana. I don't know if they pay attention to it anymore. It's just been ad nauseum. These people it's demanded of them by our government to go out there and beg. Put a can in your hand and start begging. And that's what it kind of reminds me of. And it's just not a very appealing picture by the average person in Louisiana being told by these groups every year how bad off we are if you don't pay more taxes or cut the budget.
Okay, two more questions. Number one is, do you think that we're going to have a fiscal session this February?
I don't know. My opinion is better for the governor to get it done in February than wait till after the next session. I think that's one of his priorities. I don't know if it's a priority of the Republicans, but here's the problem: if you can't get 70 votes, why have a session? And I don't think they have 70 votes. And by the way, we're closer to the election than we were last year. A year before when we prolonged this. So, and as the polls showed, there's not a lot of support for the penny sales tax, the penny being renewed basically by the majority of Republicans in Louisiana. And the Republicans aren't going to, they don't have to budge based on political persuasion. And now, will some of them? Yeah, some of them might. There are legislators who will give on certain things. I represent some of them. I talk to them constantly. They're willing to give on things, and they think that they can go back home and say that we raised a penny, but we did this or we did that. They're looking for something else to go back home and say, other than we just renewed the penny, and we are now having surpluses. We are getting more money, keeping more money in the state, and the governor's that's one of the things I think we haven't seen hashed out is to renew the penny, what is going to be the concessions? And really and truly, I think eventually it's smart for both sides to come up with something that both can live with, and I don't think we're there yet.
Okay, so the last question I have is this. We talked about maybe Steve Scalise running for governor. You brought up what if the House, the Republicans lose the House? We talked about maybe John Kennedy. We talked about John Bel Edwards being at 64%, but that is in a vacuum, and that's before this fiscal cliff issue has to be solved. But we haven't talked about some other candidates, such as, and I'm just throwing out names that I've read. I'm sure that you've read these too, and Dr. Abraham, Jeff Landry, Steve Waguespack. Do you have any inside information about any of that, about any of these other names or anybody else?
Left out a very interesting.
Oh, left somebody out. Okay.
Karen Hewitt, Republican senator from Slidell area. I think she goes all the way across maybe St. Bernard. Yeah, she's a state senator. She's a former
Right.
executive with one of the oil companies. Very, very articulate, bright management style. She's been more active on the attack of John Bel Edwards. Her profile is raising, whether she'll run or not. Abraham from Monroe area being a doctor. All of these, and Jeff Landry, who's potentially loved by the Tea Party and very conservative voters. Well, let me go back and repeat what I said. It doesn't matter what they want. It matters what Kennedy wants. Until he's a United States senator, he is. In case anyone hasn't noticed, he's probably one of the most quotable people in the United States as of today. A remarkable achievement to be on whatever news network it is. He's on it with his little sayings, and he can raise probably $10 million overnight from wherever he wants. He's very powerful. He's I think from Louisiana, he's one of the most politically powerful people in the state. Obviously, the governor's politically powerful, but in a state that's dominated by Republicans, I would probably give us a slight edge over power, but still John Bell's governor, and that's a very powerful position. So you're talking about the two most powerful people, but I'm saying that those are the two people. Everybody below them, including people below John Bel Edwards who are Democrats, they got no shot to take John Bel Edwards' place as running for governor. He is the king of the mountain. Well, at the present time, I'm saying that about Kennedy. Abraham can walk around Louisiana all he wants saying he wants to run for governor, but until John Kennedy says yay or nay, I'm running or not, and I don't have a problem with him running, because if Kennedy doesn't run, they'll probably have an advantage. But until he says they're running or not, they're not really a credible candidate.
Gotcha. I definitely understand what you're saying. So you don't think that Waguespack or Abraham, I mean, you would say that they're lower tier candidates? I mean, certainly, Kennedy is preempted the field at this point in time until
there's nothing wrong with Scalise. Yeah, even Scalise. Look, Scalise is if you want to talk about a powerhouse in Louisiana, Steve Scalise is it, because of his position in Washington, the tragic. Then he went through being alive as a miracle, all of those things. But Steve Scalise would go to John Kennedy and ask him if you're running, and I don't. You wouldn't see both of them running. So one of them would decide yay or nay. And for anybody who's other than John Kennedy to say I'm running for governor, um, the money people in Louisiana, the major political players, are not going to say, "Oh well, look, I'm glad you're running. Let me write you a check." They know that there's somebody else out there who's a uh, much bigger player,
Right.
and that's not going to insult John Kennedy and start writing checks for a congressman from North Louisiana or anyone else. Sharon Hewitt could be potentially a very good candidate, a woman, uh, former executive, uh, female Republican. She runs with Kennedy. That's his worst nightmare. Think about that. What if she runs with Kennedy? She may decide, hey, I'm going to run as a woman. So there are all kinds of scenarios out there. But no matter what happens until Kennedy decides, I've said it. You basically said it. There's the decision. It's got to come from Kennedy, and then everybody else will start. Uh, then we'll know who else is going to run. But I think the two major players are first Kennedy, then Scalise, and then if those two decline, you probably improve the chances of John Bel Edwards being reelected. But you're still talking about Louisiana with a lot of money coming in here to unelected. But he knows that. He's ready to face that. It won't be a big surprise to him. So he'll be ready for whatever the Republicans throw at him. And he's already there. So uh, it's not like he's um, nobody knows him. He's got a good
Mm-hmm.
reputation. He's got a following. He's getting uh, good marks as his job performance in Louisiana. So it sets up to be a very interesting next year. And this year will have some impact on it. But we won't know until later in the year as far as who's going to run against John Bel Edwards.
Right. Okay, well, Bernie, listen, hold on. We're going to turn off some buttons and tell everybody goodbye. Appreciate those people who are watching for watching. Hopefully that we answered some of your questions. Hopefully that you'll share the video with others or like it. And we will put up different excerpts on BayouBuzz.com and today. And Bernie, as always, I really appreciate you taking your time and sharing your wealth of information with us. Really, it's absolutely enlightening. So I'm going to go push some buttons and stay with me for a few seconds. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it as always. Interesting conversation. Good, good discussion. I think anybody who likes politics or here in Louisiana will understand and uh, give them some insight into what's going to happen this year and a little insight into what's going to happen next year. So I thought we covered the waterfront.
It's been really interesting. A lot of waterfront too. So, Bernie, stay with me, and everybody else. Goodbye. Appreciate it, and please share. Thank you. One more button, Bernie.